to the Daily Dawg podcast. Today is Monday, November 10th. And this is episode 43 of the Daily Dawg podcast. This is our Mississippi State game reaction or breakdown, recap, I guess, any of those. We'll call it the Mississippi State recap. We're going to go back and take a look at the Dogs' very impressive and exciting and fun win over the Mississippi State Bulldogs from this past Saturday. This is, of course, going to be the week leading up to the Texas game on Saturday, the last big conference game at home, or Georgia's last conference game of the season, and it'll be the last big conference game at home. Georgia will have one more home game after that against Charlotte before heading to Atlanta to play Georgia Tech in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So those are our last three games of the season, so we're winding down towards the end of the season, and Georgia seems to be winding into a team that we've been waiting to see a little bit more out of. Now, listen, we don't want to get caught thinking it's fool's gold too much, okay? Mississippi State and is what they are. Now, listen, a lot of people, and me included, we're a little bit concerned about this game. Again, I rejected the notion that it could be a trap game because I really don't think that Kirby Smart, I think his coaching style and efforts throughout the year have prevented what we call trap games traditionally. This team isn't very emotional in the sense that they don't go out and have a big emotional performance and then have a big letdown. They do kind of just continue focusing on the ideas that they talk about, and they may seem just like phrases that we all get into repeating over and over again, but they do just keep chopping wood. They just do keep focusing on playing their game and doing what it is they're going to do, play Georgia style of football. And because of that, they more or less, sometimes they play better, sometimes they don't play as well, sometimes they make mistakes, but they don't really fall into the trap game problem so much. So, and I think that was certainly the case here. You still might have thought they might have been a little flat. You might have thought that any of a number of things might have happened. And of course, Mississippi State also has been a team a little bit on the rise. They were, like we talked about coming into this game, they were just 2-10 last year, but they came into this game with Georgia 5-4. However, with just the one conference win against Arkansas, but they had been really competitive. They played Texas, they played Florida, all within one score, when they were playing those. So, in fact, the only game they lost this year before this Georgia game, where they lost by more than one score, was the game against Texas A&M, where Texas A&M beat them 31-9, or a 22-point victory. So, Georgia's the only team. That's a nice comparison to see that Georgia's the only team that's been able to come to play State and beat them also by 20 points and by more than one score. Tennessee was taken to overtime. Florida just won by 2 points, and Texas also had to go to overtime after a big comeback to beat Mississippi State. So, look, we don't want to get caught trying to make Mississippi State into something they're not. They're not a juggernaut team. They're not a team that people are going to look at and say, oh my gosh, that's an amazing measuring stick. But they are a solid team that's on the rise, and they've been playing some good football, and they've played teams tough. And so playing any SEC game on the road, they have a noisy stadium, they bring those cowbells, they create a good atmosphere. And so, anytime you can go on the road in the SEC and win a game, especially a team that's got a little momentum, had just won a game that was important to them, beating Arkansas, winning their first conference game in almost 2 years, then you say, all right, this is a team with some momentum, a team that's on the rise on the season, and they're playing at home. They got a lot going for them. So when you can go in and do what Georgia did, which is basically take the crowd and take the team out of the game early, then that's great. And this is also something Georgia has not been able to do this year. And this has been a high level of there's been a high level of criticism from Georgia fans to national media and people when looking at Georgia and trying to assess them as a real contender this year, both just for the playoff and as a national championship contender if and when they make that playoff. And one of the knocks has been, look, this team starts slow. They let everybody attack them. They get down, a couple scores early to every team, and they have to make a big comeback, and then they're just barely able to win the game if they are. And of course, against Alabama, we didn't actually come back and win the game. So This is a game in which, I think some people actually still sort of push the narrative. I heard somebody say, well, in doing the highlights and talking about this game, since State scored first and Georgia was down 7-3, I saw some people still kind of saying, well, Georgia just has to make it hard on themselves. Georgia just has to be down before they're ready to go out and play. Again, I think this narrative is actually getting a little bit old, the sense of starting slow. As I pointed out, the Florida game was pretty much a back and forth affair from the get-go. And yes, we did fall down in the first half 10-7, but there was never a time where Georgia was down 2 possessions in that game. Florida simply, we made a couple mistakes, and Florida was able to get a couple scores and go from being down 7 to up 10-7, and then we tie the game up at halftime. So, it's 10-10 at the half. So I think that it's hard to say, okay, well, we started terribly slow. Yeah, Florida's not a great team either, but we were only, we were only a 7.5 point favorite in that game, and just like this game, we were about a 7.5 point favorite. ESPN's FPI prediction model did predict or expect us to win this game by about an 80% clip, but still, basically a little over a one score favorite in this game. So same as the Florida game. And then you go back before the Florida game and you say the Ole Miss game, and the Ole Miss game, same thing. Yes, it's by the time you get to the third, heading towards the fourth quarter, Georgia's down by 9 points. But again, in this game, we had never not matched them for score. The defense, you could say, started slow in the sense that Ole Miss scored on their first 5 possessions, but we also scored on our first 8 possessions. So the net flow of the game was that they get the ball and score, or, we get the ball and score. They get the ball and score, we get the ball and score. The difference, or the reason we had some separation, was we had kicked a pair of field goals where they had scored touchdowns. And so, we found ourselves with a 2-point differential at one point, and then when they got the ball the next time and scored in that same pattern of we score, they score, we score, they score, they scored a touchdown, we're down by 2, now they're up by 9. So yes, that's 2 possessions, but they never had 2 possessions where they scored, stopped us, then scored again, and started building a lead. It was simply a matter of we didn't match them early on as efficient. We took more field goals than they did, but in the end, we end up scoring on 8 consecutive drives. They score on 5, and we win the game. So I think it's a little unfair to keep pinning this narrative of slow starts on Georgia at this point. Yes, they earned it from early in the season, but this is 3 games now in which Georgia has basically been matching or controlling the flow in the case of the Mississippi State game. In the Florida and the Ole Miss games, they pretty much match what the opponent was doing until they were eventually able to wrest control of the game, in both cases near the end of the game in Florida and Ole Miss. In this game, Mississippi State got the ball first, and Jeff Lebby, like we talked about, is an offensive coach, considered one of the better offensive minds out there right now in the game. And he's done a good job of making the Mississippi State team one that has been a scary offense. They put up, even last year, when they were 2-10, they came to Athens and they put 31 points on the board in a 41-31 Georgia win. So even last year, they were putting points on the board, and this year they continue to be upper 1/3, upper half offense in FBS competition. So, State is a team with a decent offensive record, and what good offensive coaches do, like we've talked about a lot of times, is they'll put together, every coach puts together sort of scripted plays. Every team's going to come into a game where they get the ball first and they have a set of plays. They've gone ahead and scripted it. Why wait until the last minute, right? Why wait until you get the ball and go, let's look at our play sheet. What do we want to do with the ball here? You're going to get the ball at least one time. It's going to be on a kickoff, right? So this is the other thing that about it is you're going to start when you start the game. You say but most of the time you're going to start the game on the 25-yard line because you're either going to get the ball first, or if the other team scores, then they'll kick off. I guess there is the option that you could force them into a punt, and if they drive the ball and then punch you down to your own 5 or 6 yard line. So coaches have to think about that variable, I guess, which is maybe a certain percentage of the time, maybe they actually do get pinned inside their 25. But a lot of times, statistically speaking, they can expect to get the ball at about their 25-yard line on that first possession, and then they can script their plays. In fact, Jeff Lebby in this game was so excited about his scripted plays and wanting to run his offense the way he did, maybe from a certain point on the field, that when they won the toss, they actually took the ball first. Which is great, because if we had won the toss, we would have asked to defer, which is what we typically do. So in this case, we were able to, and I'll talk about it a little bit, that trade-off did not actually work so well for Mississippi State in this particular time. But it did work in the sense that they took the ball first, and they go on a 14-play, 75-yard drive for a touchdown. And so my point is, look, they're a good offensive team. Their coach is an offensive guru. They scripted their first drive. I don't know if we're going to say they started slow. Yes, I'd love to see our defense go out and post a 3-and-out, or just stop them and get the ball back and then give us a chance to go down and score and take the lead first and, go from there. But I don't exactly consider it a failure. In many games, you're going to see both teams start off, and you see it all the time, actually. You see a lot of games, and you'll hear the announcers be like, well, we could be in for a shootout today because maybe we get the ball first and go 6 plays, 75 yards, and score a touchdown. And we kick off, and the other team gets the ball, and they go 5 plays, 75 yards, and touchdown. And so it looks like you're off into the races, a barn burner. Everybody's going to score. But then all of a sudden, a lot of times, you find yourself in the third quarter, and it's a 10-7 game, or neither team scored again. It's still 7-7, go into the half, something like that. So a lot of times those first drives, teams look really impressive. Again, they've scripted those. They know what they're going to do. They pre-plan. They pick their best plays because they want to get off on to the best start, right? They want to get off on the right foot and do the best they can. So they pick the plays that they're most confident in. They practice those. They've scripted them. Everybody knows what they're going to run. After that, now it becomes down in distance and circumstance, and you just have to see how the game's going to flow. And you just don't always know. So it's going to be a little different. So, again, not really upset that State gets the ball first and goes down the field and scores. Sure, I'd love to see us just shut them out. Sure, I'd love to see us pitch a shutout. They don't score at all. That'd be great. But I don't think that was a highly realistic expectation, because we know that State is a good offense. We talked about Lebby being from that Baylor offensive tree, the same one that Josh Heupel at Tennessee's come from. And so we know that they're going to be sort of a fast-paced, go-quick offense. They get a couple first downs, and they're going to get going. They've played well this season, and they've been able to put up yards and points on virtually everybody. Even Texas, who has one of the best defenses in the country. Texas gave up over, well, let's see. How much did they give up? I will tell you. Texas... I'm just trying to make sure. Yeah. So Texas gave up, Mississippi State was able to get 445 yards of offense and 38 points against Texas. So in regulation, it went to overtime, but Mississippi State failed to score in overtime. So I mean, I think we can look at them and say, look, they could be a very dangerous and explosive team, even against a legitimate top 10, top 15 defense like Texas. They were able to put up 445 yards and 38 points. So this performance, Georgia holds Mississippi State for the game to 322 yards and 21 points. And I was a little disappointed to see. I mean, I'm a stat junkie. I think you may have picked that up from now. And I'm a greedy stat junkie. When I'm watching the game, I'm watching the flow, and I'm like, ooh, maybe we'll hold them under 300 yards. Maybe we'll get, and I'm already thinking about how good this is going to make our stats look. Like, okay, this is going to improve our overall stats. We're going to go, we're going to drop down to holding people under 18 points a game. I'm often looking at this because it's just part of the way I enjoy looking at the football. I'm a number and stats guy, and so and I've said before, one of the frustrating as a baseball fan, it's great because almost once you played a couple weeks of baseball, you have enough stats to start looking at something and saying something about it. College football is a little tricky. I've been saying that all season. When you try to look at stats with college football, we're now at the point where we played. We're 8-1. We played 9 games. Well, now the stats are starting to stack up and be somewhat meaningful, but they can be skewed heavily early in the season. I mean, you tend to hear, I think it's almost silly that announcers even bother. They talk about like maybe you have a big matchup early in the game. Let's say Georgia was playing Clemson in the second game of the season, and both teams had played I mean, maybe seconds too early. Let's do a different example. Let's say we have the big first conference game. Like, so we had Tennessee, like third game of the year, and you played 2 games against cupcakes like we did, and maybe Tennessee had done the same. So the announcers would be, well, Tennessee comes into this game, number 1 in the country in overall offense and points, scoring 51 points a game and 580 yards. It's like, yeah, they played 2 cupcake teams. I mean, what does that mean? It means nothing, right? So, I mean, I understand you got to say something, and the stats are the stats, but early in the season, it's hard for them to mean a lot. One of the themes that I was looking at today, getting ready for this podcast, is realizing that, this was a game, this was one of the first times where we have sort of had a stat padding game, even though it was an SEC game, even though it was an SEC road game. This is one of the times where now with these accumulation of stats, you start to look at it and you say, well, our offense and our defense are starting to round out in the top 25, top 30 of most of the categories. We're starting to see where, hey, look, we're the 5th ranked team in the country, but to a certain degree, again, if you're the 5th ranked team in the country, do the stats, do they start to measure up? Do they mean anything? I mean, do they support that? And again, when you've only played 3 or 4, maybe even 5 games of the season, and especially if you played one really great dominant defensive team, or if you played a series of teams that are terrible on defense, then again, your stats may be skewed. And one thing that has kind of hurt Georgia a little bit, and that skewed our stats a little bit defensively and how our defense had performed, I've kind of alluded to this or said it outright, made this point a couple times recently, is look, we in our first several games of the year, first 5-6 games of the year, we played a number of teams that are very high level offensive teams. Our 3rd game of the year, we played Tennessee, then we played Alabama in the next game, then we played Ole Miss a couple weeks ago. So those are 3 now Alabama overall is not an elite offensive team, but Tennessee and Ole Miss are. Those are both teams that are putting up yards and points in the top 10, top 15 by almost all the metrics. So when you play teams like that, yeah, it's great if you can hold them, and we did more or less. I mean, Ole Miss still scored 35 points in the game, which is excellent performance, but we held them to about 367 yards, 360 something yards, I think. I forgot the exact total now, but actually I have it right here. I could tell you. We held them to 351 yards. So that's way below their average. They average close or over 500 yards a game. So yes, they got 35 points up. That was a little below their average. Their yardage was way down. They were less efficient. Their passing game, they only completed 53% of their passes. And when you look at that whole mysterious passer rating, and again, I don't quote this stat a lot because I can't even tell you how it's computed. I really don't know, and I haven't dug into it, and I haven't found it to be super diagnostic. In this moment, I could look at it and say, well, okay, here's something interesting. When we played Ole Miss, we held them to a 123 passer rating. On the season, they're more like 150, 175, something in that range. So again, it's great if you can stuff everybody and pitch shutouts and hold them to 0 yards or whatever, but that's a little bit unreasonable, especially against the better teams. So the first metric or the first level of success that I think you want to look at against better teams is, did we hold them below their averages? Did we make them do less than they would normally do in a game? And we certainly did that offensively against Ole Miss. Even though they put 35 points up, they were well below their typical yardage. They were not as efficient. They had less yards per play in average than they're used to having, and they were much less efficient in the passing game. And that's actually something Georgia's actually been doing pretty well. Its last 4, 5, 6 games, Georgia's been holding teams. When you look at the overall passing rating for the game, Georgia's been holding teams to around 59, 60, 61% passing completion, and like in the neighborhood of six yards an attempt on average, which is pretty low. We talked about like 9 or above 6 yards per attempt is kind of an elite level. But a lot of good passing teams will come in averaging in that 7, 8, 9 yards per attempt passing game. And Georgia's been able to hold these teams down these last 5 games. They may have still had some yardage. They may still put points on the board, but the defense has actually been able to hold them below their season averages in terms of passer rating and yards per attempt. And that's actually been sort of a hallmark of the Georgia defense in its best years. You go back and look at 21 and 22, 2021 and 2022 teams. There was a lot of times where we played these elite quarterbacks, and we didn't hold them to nothing. Maybe they had a touchdown or two. Maybe we were not able to intercept them. Maybe we did intercept them. But you might see a game where a quarterback who's averaging 325 yards a game and 3 touchdowns came into the game, played Georgia, and they had 175 yards and 1 touchdown. So that's kind of what the Georgia defense at its best is usually able to do. And you almost can never stop a good quarterback completely, but you can frustrate them and make them less efficient. Instead of having them average 10 yards an attempt, which they might be averaging on the season, putting them in the top 5 or 6 in the country, they come in, they play Georgia, and they walk out having averaged 5.9 yards per attempt. So Georgia's been able to do that most recently in these games, and that's been very effective. So, for instance, Gunner had a nice game this last game. He averaged 9.1 yards per attempt. So that's 9 being that elite category and above. Whereas we held the 2 different Mississippi State quarterbacks, we held them to 64% passing, a little below their average, but only 173 yards total through the air and a 122 passer rating. So we frustrated them. Plus, the defense actually did, I'll just go ahead and mention now, these are some of the stats that I was going to get into a little bit later, but the defense was able to get 3 sacks on the day, 2 early, right in the first quarter. We sacked them twice. We had another sack later in the game, and that's a big deal. We'd gone 2 games without a sack, and we only had 8 on the season coming in. So 3 sacks represents almost 10% or more of our production on the season. So again, I'm not really clear looking at this. I mean, I told you coming into the game that I thought we would get pressure on the Mississippi State quarterback or quarterbacks. They did end up changing quarterbacks in the game. And I said I thought we would have pressure in this game, in part because they had been poor. This is one area, despite being a high-level offense, they have been poor at giving up sacks. And so they had already given up 29 sacks on the season, which I made the point that if you were a team and you had accumulated 29 sacks, that would put you in the upper 10, 15 in the country, top 10, 15 rankings as far as sacks at this point in the season. It's not even a bad season total, much less than to be, coming towards, still have a few games left and have already accumulated 29 sacks. So these are all positive. So again, what's the overall vibe here? Look, the overall vibe is this was a great game. Georgia built up a lot of good stats, and it's not just about building good stats, but as you look at how the season has flowed and you put this game in the context of it, Georgia is moving to where not only are we the number 5 team in the country, we're in a position to be to get a playoff berth. We're still in contention for the SEC championship, but you're starting to see that our overall performance is standing out or coming together. It's coming to add up to like, hey, there's some reasons why it's not just we happen to be in an SEC team or a name brand and we've won a few games, but we haven't done much. No, overall, the team is starting to show production when you look up and down the stat sheet that is befitting of a team that is in the upper 25 or so of the country. So, listen, coming into the game, I predicted my final prediction on this is I ended up coming down saying I thought the final score would be 34-21. It was 41-21. So I am going to toot my own horn a little bit and say, look, I'll do it when I'm way off. I'll tell you I'm way off. But when I'm close, I want to go ahead and point out and say, hey, I was pretty close. My goal here is not I don't think the most important thing is to say, hey, I predicted the score, or I'm going to predict the score, and then that's what's going to happen. I think what's more important is understanding how our team plays, how our team is doing, whether it's progressing or falling behind, and how we think we're going to match up against the teams we play. That's what's going to give you a more intelligent and a more thoughtful analysis. I mean, you can always throw a dart at a dartboard and maybe you hit the score and you say, oh, I got the exact score. I came to that conclusion, as you know, if you've been listening and following me, as I do this sort of breakdown where we talk about what are the real. There's 3 major, There's 3 major comparisons or 3 major matchups in the game. Our offense versus the other team's defense, our defense versus the other team's offense, and then what I lump together as coaching intangibles and special teams, because they all kind of contribute, but no one of those is big enough by itself. And, I'm usually able to go through those matchups and say, okay, well, if if we probably are favored in 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3 of those matchups, then it favorably says, look, I think then we have a 60, 70, 80% chance of winning this game, right? Then we go through and we look at what I call the true outcomes. And the true outcomes are you could get blown out, you could blow the other team out, or it could be a 1 or 2 score game. So, most of the time you end up with the line, and I usually assign a percentage to it. So I said, look, I think Mississippi State had a 5% chance at best of blowing us out in this game. And that's based on how the team has played this year. A lot just on our team. We have fallen behind, but we've always been able to fight back. We've came a little short against Alabama. We've won all the other games. So there's just no reason to believe that coming into this game, Mississippi State would be the team that not only could build a lead, but keep building on that lead and hold us down. So, and again, we're defining blowouts as winning by 3 scores or more. So this was a blowout. We won by 20 points. That's 3 scores or more. And so that was great. And I also said I thought our offense would gain over 400 yards, maybe better than that, but at a minimum over 400 yards and 30 points. And I thought our defense would hold them to under 400 yards and 29 points. You say, well, that doesn't sound impressive. Well, I wasn't willing. I start doing these in gaps, I guess, of 100. So you say, look, you hold them. This team averaged over 400 yards a game of offense. This team was averaging over 30 points a game in offense. So if we can hold them under that, hold them under their averages, then, and we meet or exceed our averages, then again, you'd say, then we have a pretty strong chance to win the game. And I thought that all the matchups said we would do that. I thought our offense would grind out and get 400, 450 or more yards of offense and well over 30 points. I was very confident in that. And they did. They end up with 567 yards on the day. This is our biggest yardage output of the year offensively, and 41 points. So you're getting close to our top. We scored 44 points against Tennessee, but of course that was in overtime. And then 35 points against Kentucky, 45 points against Marshall. So this is one of our best offensive outputs, no matter how you look at it. Right up there, almost up there in points, definitely up there in yardage. It was also, we were averaging about 6.9 yards per play throughout the game, or at least in the run game. We had over 300 yards rushing for the first time in a while, and that's always a big stat. So I said I thought the run game, I also made the point I thought we would be balanced. I thought we'd have over 250 yards passing and over 200 yards rushing. Well, we did have over both. Gunner had over about 262 yards. Puglisi threw one pass, he didn't complete it. And so we did have over 250 yards passing, and we had over 300 yards rushing. So a very good performance all around by the offense. And again, big kudos to Nate Frazier. I'm sure you saw it, but I mean, what an amazing game by him. And sometimes you see a guy rip off, have a 100-yard game as a running back because he rips off one long run, and then he has a bunch of mediocre runs, and it adds up to, he has a 50-yard touchdown, and then they give him the ball another 20 times, and he averages 3 or 4 yards a carry, and he ends up with 120 yards on a whole bunch of carries and one big run. Well, Frazier was dominant. He only had the ball 12 times in this game, 181 yards. I mean, it's almost a 15-yard per carry average in this game. And he looked like a man possessed. I mean, he stumbled on the long touchdown and then, put his hand on the ground and kept going. How many times I've seen not just him, but a lot of Georgia backs stumble and then go down when he almost broke that one. Well, today he did break it. He stumbled, but he went through it. He busted through some arm tackles. He was just fast. He was electric. He looked fast. Obviously, he held onto the ball. We had some fumble trouble early in the year, and that got him set back a little bit. And again, from a statistic point of view, one of the things this did, Chauncey Bowens was already averaging over 5 yards a carry. That's kind of the first standard you look at, is you say 5 yards a carry or above, really good effort by your running back. And you go back and you look at our really good offensive teams and our really good run teams from earlier. Last year was not a good run team, like we talked about. And we've often had two guys at the top of the list. Whatever their yardage totals were for the season would depend a lot on how many times they got the ball, how much we ran, various things. So in other words, we might not have a bunch of 1,000-yard rushers, and we haven't really lately, but what our team has often done, you go back and look at our best teams, and you see one guy has 700, 800, 900 yards rushing, and another guy's got 600, 700, 800 yards rushing. They're all, and they both were averaging 5, 5.5, 6 yards a carry. A game or two ago, we were kind of still down there a little bit. Neither Frazier nor Bowens had consistently. Bowens had one big game. Frazier had one big game. They both had some good runs, but neither of them had busted out consistently enough. But Bowens put up some nice runs. Even though he finished under 100 yards, he had a couple big runs late in the Florida game that helped make that game, obviously the big touchdown, the go-ahead touchdown, but a couple other big runs on that drive. And he finished with over 70 yards in the last game. And that got him up over 400 and up over a 5-yard per carry average. He still was effective in this game, but not as electric as Frazier. Frazier has the amazing game, 181 yards, and the 15-yard per carry plus average. And now Frazier is up over 500 yards and over a 5-yard per carry average. And then you have Gunner in there with over 300 yards now, rushing at quarterback. And even Peanut has got in there, and he's getting close to 200 yards. So you're starting to see the stats accumulate with what the kind of the good Georgia offensive, and especially the good Georgia running teams of the past would look like, where you'd see us accumulate, 200, somewhere between 180 and 250 yards a game on average rushing. And you'd see that stack up where you have, kind of your number 1A and 1B back, and then maybe you have a third guy getting some yardage, and maybe even a fourth guy getting some yardage. And, the ultimate example of that's thinking back to when you had Nick Chubb and then Sony Michel, your 1A and 1B guy, and then you had can't say Swift. Swift was our third running back, and you think back to like he was a freshman in the 2017 season, and he came in and he had like 600 yards in that season and was averaging like 6-7 yards per carry. So you look down the list and you see, again, just sort of dominant performances where everybody's got really nice yard per carry average, and you just rotate in these guys, and they're just pounding. And again, the SEC championship game against Auburn in 2017 was probably the best example of that, where Georgia just pounds them. Our two main guys are getting their runs, but then you go to a change of pace. Swift comes into the game and he rips off the long touchdown, makes it 28-7, and that's how the game ends. So, this was great. So we're really seeing the game round into form. Noah Thomas had a big touchdown in the Florida game and some nice blocks, but now he comes back. He has 3 catches, 78 yards, long touchdown. This was a game where we had more long offensive plays than we've had in a while. Several plays that were over 30 yards. In fact, this was a little bit of an oddity. One of the reasons that State was able to get the 21 points and over 300 yards ultimately in the game, I made comments talking to some people and chit-chatting on text and talking to people. It's like this game just felt like it was forever. I mean, once we got to 38-7, I'm looking at the clock. It's like, you still got third, fourth quarter. You still got a lot of third, fourth quarter to play. Like, this game should be over. We've done enough. We're up 31 points. We killed it. And so you could kind of sense that, State was going to ultimately get some yards and points and statistically maybe ugly up the game a little bit for us. And they did. But not so bad. I mean, actually, the Georgia defense, the last time State touches the ball, their last drive of the game, their backup quarterback was in, and he was able to hurt us with some runs. We got him in some long third downs, and a couple times he busted away for some runs, a very athletic guy. And we started playing defense, I think, a little bit more, where you start dropping back and just trying to keep everything in front of you as you've got a big lead and you're trying to run out the clock. And he was able to take advantage of that. He ripped off about 55 yards on, I think, 12 carries. That helped push them over 149 yards in the game rushing, which is actually our worst total giving up this season. But obviously the rushing, if you compare rushing game, we had 303, they had 150. We outgained them by 150 yards in the run game. So that's usually an example of a game where you were very powerful and did what you wanted to do. But he did help pad their rushing stats, and he helped keep the drives alive that could have possibly ended if he hadn't been able to scramble, especially on third and long. And but they get the ball that last time, and he rips off an 18-yard run and then follows it up with a 50-yard. They had this one track speedster you probably heard him talk about during the game, and Chandler, I think was his name or something, but he gets under the ball on a long pass that looks like it was actually overthrown, but he actually catches it. And then they're down at our 2 or 5 yard line. They end up punching the ball in. And again, by this point, we'd put a lot of defensive subs in. This is the last time State will have the ball. But on that drive, they get 81 yards on that drive in 5 or 6 plays or something like that, and they get the touchdown. And before that, late there in the 4 or 5 minutes to go in the I guess it was actually about 6 or 7 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, halfway through the fourth quarter, that before State got that drive, they had been held to 241 yards and 14 points, which is, again, way, way below their averages. And by any standards, what you would call an excellent defensive performance against any team. Any team you play, if you can hold them to under 250, 260 yards like that, and just 14 points, that's an excellent game by your defense. So we start rotating in more guys. You got more bench guys playing. It's getting late in the fourth quarter. You're moved into a little bit of a keep it in front of you, slow the game down, defensive performance. They were able to take advantage of that and get the score. Look, I'm not trying to, again, make apologies. It'd be great if our third and fourth and fifth team guys come in and just shut them down. And they shouldn't have given up the plays they did. Nobody should get behind you on a 50-yard pass. You shouldn't let a quarterback just break free without keeping contained and run for 18 yards on second or third and long. That's, they shouldn't have done that. And so we, State earned those yards and those points. But I was just trying to put some context in it. In the big picture, we were up 41-14. We'd had over 500 yards offense, and the defense had held them under 250 yards and 14 points until you got late in the game. Some other things. Let's see. Oh, well, first, I barely took a moment. I should acknowledge, hey, 900th win all time. And I was remiss. I wrote this in the comments when I posted the video for the pregame, the last podcast before the game, in the prediction podcast. But 900 wins. Again, I'm a history guy, so I'm excited about that. I mean, the one thing I'll say is, look, it doesn't change. It's not like we leapt over 5 or 6 teams, to be like, oh, we're 9th all time. We were 9th all time in number of wins at 899. We are 9th all time in the number of wins at 900. So, but it's a nice club. Look, the all-time wins, Michigan's at the top of that list at 1,019. So they've already gone into the 1,000-win category. They're the only team in the 1,000-win category. So now you realize we're 119 wins somehow behind Michigan, and maybe that's a history discussion we'll have one day in the offseason. But Ohio State is your next team at 986 wins. Alabama is up there at third at 981. Then Notre Dame, Texas, Oklahoma, Penn State, and Nebraska. So those are the teams that are ahead of us in all-time wins. Nebraska is at 930 wins. So Nebraska has had some big down seasons in the last 20 years, especially in the last 5 or 10 years. And so we've actually made up a lot of ground on Nebraska. I mean, we have closed that gap. Now we're 30 wins behind them. Obviously, we're not going to catch them today or tomorrow. It takes years to possibly. I mean, I don't know, in my lifetime if we'll actually ever pass. I mean, we would, if you think about it, if we win 10 games every year and Nebraska wins 7, so that would be a 3-game differential, right? So it would take, we're 30 games behind them. So at that pace, it's going to take, 10 years or whatever to catch them in wins. So we've made up ground clearly in the last few years, but I don't know if we're going to catch them. Behind us, 10th all time is USC, Southern Cal. They're at 889 wins. So, or they were at 889. You know what? Let me do this real quick. All of those win totals, I forgot to refresh that. All of those win totals were before last weekend's game. So I guess USC either didn't win or didn't play. I don't know. They're still at 889. So we have an 11-game lead on USC. So again, it would be hard for them to catch us the way we're playing right now. I mean, the best they could do is sort of, right now, the best anybody could do, the way Georgia's putting up wins on an average, if you look at any 10-year span of time, would be to just sort of tread water with us. And then Tennessee. And in fact, I would say, I think it was a few years ago that Tennessee was still ahead of us on this list, but we have moved ahead of them. They have 881 all-time wins. whereas we are up to 900 now. So now we're 19 ahead of them. So, and I think we passed them a few years ago and just kind of kept building that lead as they've had some down years. So your top 15 all-time win teams, just to give you some more context: LSU at 820, Clemson at 812, and Auburn as number 14 at 808, and Texas A&M is 15th all-time at 795 wins. So again, kudos to Georgia, kudos to us as fans, yay us program, 900 wins all time. Like I said, we were already the had the ninth most wins all time. We still have the ninth most wins all time, but we are the ninth team in the history of college football to go over 900 wins. It's just kind of amazing thing. And one thing that's kind of interesting to think, Kirby's got well over 100 of those now, right? So Kirby represents more than 10% of all the wins in the history of Georgia football, which, Georgia football history goes back into the late 1800s. Been playing football for a long time now, over 130 years. And so this era that Kirby has ushered in, he has really stamped his name, not just in Georgia history, but in football history. I mean, he is really in college football history in general. So anyway, I just was remiss, and I had meant to bring that up before the game and in the prediction podcast. I didn't get around to it, and I felt a little remiss about it. And I just certainly don't want to miss the opportunity to celebrate another big milestone as part of that thing where we look at and have that a lot of pride. I know we have a lot of pride in our program. I know you'd have a lot of pride in our program, even if we were a historically 500 winning percentage team, but we're not. We are a team that's nearly won 70% of its games throughout history and now has 900 wins, and that just sort of adds to that credentials and that idea of Georgia being one of the top 10 programs of all time. And being able to move to a place where we've moved past a few teams and moved out of that 10, 11, 12, 13th position, and now we're being in the 9th position all time again, just sort of adds to that idea where you look at wins, winning percentage, bowl records, national championships, conference championships, all these things, and put it together, sort of amalgamize all that and say, well, what do you got? Okay, well, you can see Georgia's a team that's, again, on average, probably about somewhere in the 7th to 10th best team all time. So we'll get, again, that's another argument I plan to do for off-season kind of thing where we can look a little bit more at the history and whatnot, but it's nice to at least reflect on where we are in that as we, hit these milestones. So, so let's recap where we are so far in this episode. So Georgia wins a game that a lot of people thought could be a problem for them, and they win it easily. And for the first time in a while, people can't complain that Georgia started slow or couldn't get on top of a team that they should beat convincingly, whether it's late in the game or early in the game. Georgia led this game 24-7 at the half. That's the first time we've seen a big lead like that in a while. This game just felt, look, regardless of who we're playing and how good they were, this is the first time in a long while where this felt like the Georgia you're used to, right? The other team gets the ball first on the opening kick. They go down the field and score. And then from there, Georgia rips off 31 unanswered points to go up, or 38 unanswered points to go up 31 points in the game, up 38-7, right? And so just takes control of the game, dominates the game through most of the rest of the first quarter, all the second quarter, all the third quarter. And then, as things start to, as we start to move in some backups, as we start to just focus on just running the ball and bleeding clock, and they put some backups in, or, they keep going, the game sort of slows down, bogs down a little bit, doesn't just, keep up at the same pace where you end up winning 65-7. But just a solid overall, really good victory, really, really looking like Georgia playing Georgia football. And, we did some things that we haven't done in a while. We had 3 sacks in the game. Wanted to call out some defensive performances. I think at this point in the season, I talked earlier in the season about if this team grows and develops and starts becoming the team that we hope it becomes, a real contender, then you're going to start to see some names emerge on defense that maybe weren't everyday names coming into this season, because we've just been so much rotation, so much attrition through the defense that while we have a lot of talent, a lot of 4 or 5 star guys, a lot of guys who are really good, and Kirby Smart and Glenn Schulman can coach defense. They didn't forget how to do that. But we just, well, who are these guys? Who are the names? Who are the people we're going to count on? Well, at this point, Raylan Wilson and CJ Allen are making themselves a nuisance. I thought coming into the season that one of the real strengths of the team would be not necessarily our front guys, because we just don't have the same kind of down front linemen like we did. I mean, last year we had a couple dominant pass rushers, and years before we've had dominant guys up front in the middle like Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, and we got some good guys in those positions, but at this point nobody had emerged or been that person that just sort of dominated those positions. And now you see, though, but I thought the linebackers, and a lot of people thought, hey, but our linebackers, we still have some of the fastest and best overall linebacking core that maybe in the country, and so we thought you'd see a lot of plays early in the season when the defense was sort of taking it on the chin, especially early in some of those games. We didn't hear these names emerge as much, but now you're starting to realize, hey, Raylan Wilson, C.J. Allen, Christian Miller, these are guys we're counting on the defense, and these are guys that are making plays, day in and day out. Each time now when the game is, you're getting to that point like you did in the days gone by, Nakobe Dean or some of the other guys that you just came to know, a good Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, guys like that, where you say these guys are going to make plays. Christian Miller, he's a down lineman up front. He's playing in the nose position. These guys don't normally get a lot of sacks and a lot of tackles. Mostly what they do is clog up the space and let the other guys come in and make it happen. But, you're just starting to hear his name called more, and he's really just been doing a great job. And frankly, he doesn't have a lot of help. We don't have 5 and 6 different guys, and it's even more pressure on him now that Jordan Hall, a guy that we've been waiting to emerge for a long time when he first came to Georgia 3-4 years ago, whatever it was, I forget exactly which recruiting class, but when he first came, he was compared to Jordan Davis as sort of like, hey, a mini Jordan Davis, or pretty close to a Jordan Davis like, and he may become a dominant player. And he's had a lot of injuries, and it's just been hard for him to get on the field. And sadly, he was hurt in the Florida game, early in the Florida game, and he's out right now. I don't know for how long. But, and I think you could see a little bit of a difference. We were not quite as dominant stopping the run up front. Both of the state running backs were able to rip off a few plays with some yards early, and obviously the effort for the quarterback, their backup quarterback, to rip off some yards late in the game. I think that you see the absence of Hall a little bit, but other guys were in there, and a lot of guys did step up and do a good job. And the offense, I mean, we're starting to see this idea too that there's a number of different guys who can step up and make big plays, not just a catch and a first down. I mean, it's great when you need 3rd and 8, you're at 3rd and 7 and somebody makes an 8-yard catch and it's sort of a routine everyday catch. That's great. But we're starting to really see a moment now where you see guys making big plays, big exciting plays. Oscar Delp, I was talking to somebody during the game, and we were talking about how Delp was having a very Brock Bowers, and Delp was compared when he was recruited. When he came on, he physically looks a little bit like Brock Bowers. He's about Brock Bowers' size. He has a lot of speed. His attributes made you think he could play the same way Brock Bowers did. He could block. He has that kind of speed. He has that kind of catching ability. Not every tight end has the ability to move, catch, run, and block like Brock Bowers did. That's part of what made him unique and special. And you can see that Delp's been here for 4 years now, 5 years, and we've kind of just keep thinking, and he's had some big moments, but the thought was when Bowers turned pro that Delp would step into that role and kind of take over and also have dominant performances. And we just hadn't quite seen it, more than a few glimpses here and there. But this was a very, Delp was in on a lot of blocks. Delp was, he had a nice sort of chunk play or explosive play over the middle, a kind of play that we often ran to Brock Bowers, where the tight end goes right down that seam and the quarterback throws it right over the linebacker. And while the coverage looks like it's there, it's a great play, and it's a chunk play, 20, 30 yards downfield. Delp had a great catch in that play. Then he gets a short pass on a rollout, and he uses speed and power to just blow past and dive over everybody, get in the end zone and get the touchdown. And he also was in just on a number of key running plays with some big blocks, and you saw him out on the outside blocking both the wide receivers and the running backs. And so Delp just really had a nice day. And that ended up being important because Lawson Lucky, who had a big day against Ole Miss, was not in the game long because he got hurt. He got hit, had to go out of the game, taking the shot to the head. So, and I mentioned coming into this game, I thought this would be a game where the tight ends were able to get back into the game. One of the things that I think we've all been frustrated about is we got so used to, like in the old days, we were always running back U and we want to see great running backs. Well, we've added to our running back U legacy. Now we think of ourselves as a major tight end producing team, and we've had some great tight ends, Darnell Washington along with Oscar Delp and I meant to say Brock Bowers and some of these other guys. So we expected these guys. We've heard so much about these top recruits and these guys. We expected to emerge, and we haven't seen as much production from the tight ends. And especially early in the season, the tight ends, there seem to be a lot of questions. Where are the tight ends? Where are the tight ends? And I think what we're seeing now is, look, our offensive line is gelling. It's coming together. They look much more dominant. Juan Gaston is regularly able to play now after being hurt a lot early in the season. Excuse me. And Ernest Green is playing more now. Some of the other guys, are just getting more and more experience. And you're hearing some of the announcers talking about in the game how some of Georgia's young offensive linemen, talented young, are some of the best looking young linemen that they've seen. I heard that being said in this week's broadcast, the TV broadcast. And I think it's true that, look, we've got a lot of guys. We had a lot of attrition. We've had a lot of guys move on. A lot of young guys are stepping up, and now they've been playing a lot, and we've been mixing and matching because then we've also had a lot of injuries. So we haven't been able to rotate the depth, and we haven't been able to keep people in there consistently and have the same combinations. And now you're seeing that. Now you see, Juan Gaston and Ernest Green and some of these other guys playing, and their line is more consistent, and it just seems like they're getting more and more powerful. And we're just seeing the run game be able to be more powerful, more explosive. We're seeing that Gunner has time. I'm seeing him be able to look down the field, make some longer and deeper passes, both to the sideline and downfield, because he has more confidence and he has more time, and that Bobo can call those plays a little bit more. The playbook is opening up more. And so against Florida, which has a really powerful front seven, the tight ends had to sort of back off their pass catching side of their game and put a lot more effort into the blocking. And so we didn't see as much production against Florida like we did against Ole Miss. But with this game, I said coming into the game, I expected the tight ends to get back and have a big day. And then we saw that Delp did have a nice day. And Elias Williams obviously had the big sort of circus catch, which is kind of amazing to see a guy that big, 6'7", 265 pounds, go up in the air and land on his back. I was just glad that he didn't put a hole in the earth when he hit the ground. And I'm glad he didn't hurt himself with all of his own weight coming down and just landing on the ground like that. But it was nice to see him come in and get some plays, with Lucky having to go out. And so the tight ends they were back to being a big factor. And I think we knew that, we expected that, or we talked about that coming in, that this was going to be a game where they should get more play, and they did. We scored on 7 of 11 drives. We're always looking at that. How efficient are we on drives? We scored on 7-11 drives, and the 8th drive was we took the ball with 4 minutes and 45 seconds remaining. We drove down to the Mississippi State 28, and then we took a knee, and we burned the entire last 4:42 off the clock. So again, one of the best things, coaches love that. One of the best drives you can do. Second game in a row, we've ended the game with the ball in our hands, just eating the clock. So kudos to the offense. That's the best way to end a game, right? So at one point we had the yardage differential in this game up to 278 yards, 274, 278. I lost track of it. We finished something about 240, 245 yard differential in this game. One of those markers I'm always looking at. It's a measure of power, or what I call sort of, how powerful are you? I mean, do you win games? I mean, whether you win the game by 3 points or whether you win the game by 30 points, did you control the game? And one of the stats, along with time of possession, that often points to how you control the game, sometimes better than the score, because the score sometimes can be reflective of some wonky things. Again, Florida didn't put up a ton of offense, didn't consistently drive against Georgia at all, but, it was a one-score game, and they had a chance to possibly win that game. And part of it is because We were not efficient on offense, so we did not put up a lot of yardage. We scored, we talked about this, that the Florida game, we scored 3 touchdowns on 3 long drives, but a lot of our other drives, we were 3 and out and punting. So we were just horribly inconsistent in the Florida game. And ultimately, we were not, we didn't even score on 50% of our possessions. Well, today we score on 7 of 11 possessions, and we hold Mississippi State to scoring only 3 of their 11 possessions. So that's where we created the separation. We're very efficient, scoring on more than 50% of our drives. Like I said, that 8th drive could have been a score if that's what we're trying for, but what we were trying to do is just run out the last 4.5 minutes of the game, and that's what we did. We ended the game on offense. We ran out the clock. That's exactly what you want to do. And so what you look at in this game, though, is you say, okay, all of those things add up. And then on top of that, we controlled the game in the sense that we consistently gain yardage while holding them to not gaining yardage. So that yardage differential can sometimes be one of the better indicators of, whether or not you're controlling the game, or at least you put it together with things like time of possession and obviously whether you win and how the score goes. But all of those things kind of can make a big deal. Let me just see. I wanted to make a point. I made the point earlier that Jeff Lebby, they won the toss. Mississippi State won the toss, and they elected to take the ball first. And sometimes you'll see offensive coaches think that way. And, they often feel like they want to make a strength. And it's not unreasonable for a coach to say, look, I want to make a statement early in this game with the strength of my team. So why do I want to start on defense? I know the defense is much weaker than my offense. So I'm going to put my strongest part of my team out there first, and we're going to go out there and execute. So that's what State did. They win the toss. They're at home. They take the ball, and they do go 14 plays, 75 yards, and get a touchdown, first drive of the game. So they did put their best foot forward, you would say, and they went out there on their strength. They started the game on their strength. The downside for him is the way the game flowed. We end up getting the ball with about 2.5 minutes to go in the first half. And we have this really funny drive. You might remember this is the drive where we end up twice, where it looked like we were going to stall just in maybe field goal range or right on the edge of field goal range. And you're sort of looking at this and thinking, we got Peyton Woodring, why is Kirby, not taking the field goal? We could be up at least 20-7 at the half. If you take the field goal, it's getting late in the game. He puts the punt team out there, and then they do that funny thing where they run the punt team off and the offense comes back on. State gets caught off guard, so they call a timeout. So then after the timeout, amazingly, I was impressed. We go out and we do the same thing. And we set the offense out there, the punt team out there, and then they switch, and the offense comes running onto the field. And State doesn't call the timeout this time, but they do jump off sides, and it's 4th and 3 at this play. So an offsides gives us the first down, and then ultimately we get a screen pass to Zachariah Branch, who gets in the end zone like he's done many a times, even on short passes where he makes a play on his own. He gets in the end zone, and now it's 20. It was 17-7. Now it's 24-7. That's going to be a score at the half. We do kick off, and State basically just takes a knee. There's only 10 seconds on the clock. So effectively, I'm saying they didn't touch it. And then the way it worked out, since State took the ball first, we scored right before the end of the half. We had the ball last, in essence, and we score. And then we get the ball start the third quarter, start the second half, and we go right down the field and we score again. So essentially, when State, the sequence here that I think was a really interesting set of coaching moves and decisions is State drives down to the Georgia 23-yard line. So State gets down to the Georgia 23-yard line. They get into a 4th and 5 situation rather than kick the 39, 40-yard field goal and make it, at this point, again, it's 17-7. So that would make it 17-10. That would make it a 1-score game with about 2.5 minutes to go in the half. So you think a lot of coaches might look at that and say, you kick the field goal, you make it a 1-score game, try to play defense and get to the halftime down 1 score. But Lebby decides to go for 4th down on this, and then we stuff it. So we get the turnover on downs. We take the ball, go the other way, ultimately get the touchdown the way I just described it. And so the last time State has the ball, with about 2.5 minutes to go in the half. They're giving up a fourth down on fourth. They're giving up the ball on downs on a fourth down play that doesn't work, and they're down. They're down just 10 points, 17-7. The next time they will effectively touch the ball with a chance to drive will be in the third quarter after we've had the ball, and they're now down 24 points. They're down 31-7, and so that whole thing didn't work out so well for them about taking the ball first and the way the flow of the game went, because they took the ball first, but we had the ball last in the first half, and we get the ball first in the second half. We put touchdowns on the board in both of those, and we stretch a 10-point lead into a 24-point lead. And again, we just dominate that second quarter. We had a 21-point second quarter. So again, this feels a lot like the kind of Georgia games we've been expecting over the last several years. So I thought that was an interesting decision. I thought it was worth calling out, the way he chose to take the ball first and the way he chose, Levy, their coach, chose to skip the field goal that would have brought them within 2 scores, at least at that point in the game, and go for the touchdown. Now, I don't know whether that was a great choice or not. I don't know if it would have made any difference. I mean, if they kick the field goal and the rest of the game flows the way it does, we score the touchdown on the next drive, then score the touchdown to start second half. Then instead of being 31-7, it'd be 31-10, and I think pretty much the game flows the same way. So I'm not sure that there's any profound difference in any of that. But it is interesting, and it was some coaching choices, and it really didn't work out for them. It didn't make anything go well. Georgia defense also gives kudos. They forced 3 3-and-outs, and twice they forced fourth downs that could have been decisive. One of them was, as I just described, decisive. We got the ball back, and then we scored after that. The other one was late in the game when Mississippi State actually scored their second touchdown. We did get them. They got it deep into our territory, and we forced them into a 4th and long. It was about 4th and 7 or 4th and 10, something in that range. They were obviously already down big in the game, so it makes sense to skip the field goal and go for the touchdown. We forced them into a long 4th down play. They picked up the first down. The backup quarterback guy threw the ball right to a play right at the 1-yard line. Then they punched in after that. So, but the defense created a shot there. I always love to see when the defense forces. I love when when our offense plays well enough, and we do this a lot over the last few years, and this is one of the few times we've done it this year, where the offense had forced, even if the defense gave up some yards and the other team gets into our territory, the situation in the game forces the coach to sidestep field goals and just putting points on the board and go for it on 4th down. And when you control the game, when you control the yardage, the time of possession, the clock, and you're putting points on the board, being efficient, you force the coach to feel like, look, we're just falling behind. Even if it's not a huge score differential, they just feel those things I've been talking about. They know we're getting beat. Georgia's possessing the ball. They're scoring most of the time they get the ball. We can't afford just accept field goals here. So we're going to have to try and get a touchdown. We're going to have to try and go for the 4th down. And then a lot of times that actually has played into Georgia's hands. There's been a lot of times over the years where we force teams into those 4th downs. We stop the 4th down. Even though they had a nice drive, got deep in our territory, they end up not scoring. So the points looks good. The yardage is maybe a little off, but, we controlled the game. And so Georgia did a good job of forcing 2 4th downs, stopping one of them. If they'd stopped the other one, then State wouldn't have even scored as much as they did. But they did get the other 4th down. But the defense did a good job of also forcing 3 3-and-outs out of State's 11 drives. So they scored on 3 drives, and they had 3 3-and-outs on 3 drives. So, and then of course they moved the ball some measure of time, but not 3-and-out on the other drives. So, I think we already called out most of the offensive heroes. I mean, Gunner, I haven't really highlighted Gunner, but Gunner was fantastic. His completion percentage was not as high as it had been. He kind of lost his conference lead at 70.5%. Completion percentage, he's down to 69.5% or 69.8 now, because he was about 62% in this game. Part of that was he took a few more deep shots. If you think about it, you saw more shots down the sideline, 20 or 30 yards down the field, and a few more deep down the field shots. And we weren't able to hook up on a lot of those. That's kind of the only thing we didn't do really well. He did have some, the Oscar Delp play that I was talking about, and there was a few where, like the Noah Thomas pass that went for the long touchdown. Of course, that was not designed as a long play. That wasn't a deep pass. That was a relatively short pass when Gunner scrambled. But then Noah Thomas just weaved and knived and kept looking back over his shoulder with this way and that, and eventually got into the end zone for a 60-something yard play. So I think it was a 64-yard touchdown. So Gunner had a really nice day, and I'm glad that with the protection that they had, the offensive line gelling and playing a little better, I'm glad that he took some shots downfield. Unfortunately, we weren't able to connect on those quite as much, and that led to his completion percentage being a little down. But overall, he had an excellent game. He runs for 31 yards, gets a couple key first downs. He throws for 262, and he has 3 touchdowns in the game, no interceptions. And so just continues to have this offense either grind, or in this case, and that one thing that was a little bit different also, one of the reasons State had as many chances. Now we had, I think it was, we had 74 offensive plays and they had 68. So again, we outplayed them in the sense of we had more plays than them, but not as much as we had. It was more like 17, 18 more plays against Florida times this season. It's been 20, 24 plays advantage to Georgia. So one of the things we actually did is we had so many chunk plays, we had so many big yardage plays that we did not have very many of those drives that we often have that were over 4 yards. In fact, over 4 minutes. In fact, we had one drive, our second scoring drive. We went, I think it was 13 plays, 90 yards in about 7 minutes and 12 seconds. Great drive and really impressive. But most of the rest of the drives we had were under 3 minutes, and even if we were scoring touchdowns, just we were moving the ball a little too fast. And when that happens, when you get those big chunk yardage, you do have the tendency to give the other team the ball, give them more chances. So they had the ball 68 times. They were able to get 322 yards overall. But for the season, Georgia is moving up. Our numbers are pushing us to where you look at it right now and you say, well, look, our offense is 29th in points scored in the country. So you look at our offense, they're 29th best in putting up points, 32nd in total yards allowed. Defense is 20th in total yards allowed and 24th in points. So both sides of the ball, you're starting to see we're moving up in that upper third. And you say, well, 29, 30, 24, is that really good? Well, you'd love to be number 5 and number 9, but you see a lot of teams sometimes that maybe they're number 7, and Tennessee's in this category, right? Tennessee's in the top 7 or 8 in offense in the country, but their defense is down in the 50s or 60s or 70s. And so, they have a bigger disparity. And sometimes even teams that are winning big have a bigger disparity. So when you can have both of your units, your offensive and defensive unit, both be in the top 25 and the top 15. And we're moving up. In both cases, we're getting a little better as we go on the season. We're continuing to improve on those stats. So we're moving up into the 20s. And so really, in fact, you have, as far as points, you're 29th, defense in terms of yards allowed, you're 20th, and in points on defense, you're 24th. In points. So it's right now only the total yardage is outside of the 20s, 32nd in the country in total yards. So time of possession, we're number 10 in the country in time of possession. Our rushing yardage is, again, back up to almost, we're not quite to 200 yards a game, again, rushing. But after the 303-yard performance, we're up to 197 yards a game rushing. And the passing game continues to add to its credentials as well. So look, this was a great game overall. It was great to see the team play like we know they could. And I think the big picture, I guess the big takeaway from this is, is this just was Mississippi State overhyped? Was, in the sense that, wow, this was a difficult game? Or does Georgia beating down Mississippi State like this show that they're not that great? Well, look, they're not on Georgia's level talent-wise. We know that comparison consistently is there. And Georgia's one of the top 5, if not the top team in the country on talent. Mississippi State is not. So, and they're not even in the top 20 or top 25 necessarily. So, but But again, State has been a good team this year. They're a team on the rise, and they're a team that has played other good teams and other good defenses, other good offenses, and come away where they've been one-score games. Only Texas A&M, who's number 3 in the country right now, and just had another dominant performance beating Missouri at Missouri. And Missouri is a very good defense, and Missouri is a very good team. Now, Missouri's hampered by the fact that they are on their 3rd quarterback of the season. They had a starting quarterback. He got hurt. They went to a talented, probably next guy was going to be maybe was going to even be a better quarterback when it was his turn, but they went to him now that the first guy was hurt, and he was having a great season, and now he's hurt and out, and now they're down to a true freshman, their 3rd-string guy. So, starting a true freshman, and people made this point, I think, on some ESPN broadcasts and different places. Maybe it was either on SEC Final or College Football Final. Somebody made the point that 18 times a true freshman had their first start in a game against a top 10 team in the SEC, and this was the 18th time it happened now, and in all 18 times they got beat, and they got beat badly. It's just, that's a tough way to start your as a starting quarterback, is to start against a top 10 SEC team. And so that's what he had to do. And I just, I think it was a lot to ask, and Missouri was hampered by not having the quarterback play that they probably would have. I don't know that they would have beaten A&M with their 1st or 2nd-string quarterback, but I think it would have been a lot better game than it was. But it's still, Missouri still has a great running game. They still have a really good defense, and so for Texas A&M to go into Missouri and beat them 38-17, still very impressive. So, and so that A&M team is building its credentials as the number 3 team in the country, and that's the only other team that's been able to beat Mississippi State by more than 1 score, or not get taken to overtime like Tennessee and Texas did. So I think, I think on the whole, this is a good win, and I think that when we see that the defense is playing better, that they're getting more pressure, that they look like they're making more plays. They forced a fumble in a big moment and recovered it, and they had another 4th down stop like we talked about, and then we're able to go down and score and just have that sort of change of, they could score, but instead we score. They were in field goal range, but we stopped them and then get a touchdown going the other way. That's a 10-point swing, help precipitated by the defense. We're seeing more guys on the defense emerge as playmakers and stars in this league. The offense continues to be either an offense that's going to grind out 400 yards, but then shows they can hit you for some big plays. And we have playmakers emerging all over the place. It could be Chauncey Bowens. It could be Nate Frazier. It could be Noah Thomas or London Humphreys or Oscar Delp or Lawson Lucky if he gets back and he's healthy. And then Zachariah Branch has moved into a position where he's our leading receiver both by receptions and yardage now. And his totals are just starting to go up and up. And just time and time again, he's making big plays. He's making key 3rd downs, breaking away and making the touchdown like he did right before the half. And one of the things that we're starting to see is, I give Bobo a lot of credit. We complained a lot about how they just, all these passes near the line, all these passes right around the line of scrimmage, screen pass, screen pass, screen pass. Well, if you watch the game closely now, he's really building off of his earlier tendencies in the season. It's become a real threat that when Zachariah Branch pulls out into the flat and Gunner can look that way or fake that way, we've done that so much, and Zachariah Branch has been so effective, and we've run so many plays that way that the defense does have a tendency to get sucked up towards that play in the flat. And more often now, Gunner is not just, especially now that the line's gelling and he has more time, he's not just throwing that ball out to Zachariah. He's looking and faking that way. And then if you look, they have routes layered in, kind of a mid-level route a little further upfield and then one deeper. The touchdown to Noah Thomas against Florida was a play like that, where Zachariah Branch, or the running back, I don't remember who, was low and in the flat, and Florida's so used to seeing us put that ball out on the screen that they push up, and it just ended up where you were all low in the quarter and Noah Thomas gets the touchdown. And in this game, that happened a couple times earlier in the game where Gunner was able to take the deeper play down the field, one of the 2 deeper options, and then late in the game or late in the half, then you saw we'd already attacked further downfield. So when Zachariah Branch is open to the side, everybody's not just crashing on him anymore and keying on him and making it harder. Gunnar gets the ball out to him and he whips through everybody because he's got good blocking and a little more space now, and he gets into the end zone. And so now that play, you have to look back early in the season and say, look, whether he intended this and he was playing the long game from early in the season, knowing that if he convinced defenses that we're more often than not going to take the short pass, then later he'd be able to open it up and surprise them behind him, or whether he realizes he should do that now because he's run so many short passes. I don't think it matters. So in other words, whether he did that early in the season by design to get to this point later, or now he's just learned that, hey, we have opportunities further down the field. Either way, Bobo is calling opportunities down the field, and he's using this screen pass game that we used a lot in the season to create sort of an option look that is confusing defenses and leaving space on one side or the other. They're starting to commit either back or forward, and once they do, then we're able to take advantage either side of that, because Zachariah Branch is so dangerous if you do go short, or you're able to go deeper. And even if the running back flows out there, we've seen Chauncey Bowens and Nate Frazier catch some balls in that position and make some nice plays from that position as well. Maybe not quite as dynamic as Zachariah Branch, but how many people are? So, this was a good win, solid team, a good effort, and it gives you a lot of hope going into the game against Texas. The early line is out. Georgia's a 6.5 point favorite. We're about a 60% predicted against FBI, 60% model win at home against Texas. So that's kind of an interesting take. The line being very similar. The last two games, the line started at 7.5, and this one starts at 6.5. The line started at 7.5 against State. It did go up to 9.5. The line at Florida started at 7.5. It basically held there. It dipped, I think, briefly to 6.5, then went back to 7.5. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here on the Texas. But the early line is that those last two games, the predictive models had us about an 80% chance to win. The predictive model on this one puts us more like 65% chance to win. But still about a 6.5 point favorite at home. So solid favorite at home against a top 10 team. And Texas has now moved back into the top 10. They had the wonderful thing that happens when other teams around them, or the situation changes to a situation where they're just sitting at home and they didn't do anything, they didn't win or lose, and they move up in the rankings. So they're up in the AP poll to number 10. We'll have to wait till Tuesday night to see where everybody is in the college football playoff poll, and we'll get a chance to talk about that and go over that and talk about where we are in that and some more comparisons between those teams and where we stack up. We'll do that later in the week. But all in all, I think we were all excited. I think we're all enthused. This felt like we saw the old Georgia team break out. I think we are seeing the defense improve. I think we're seeing the offensive line especially improve and gel. And as a result, we're seeing more plays and more dynamic downfield plays because Gunnar has more time. The holes for the running backs are bigger. The blocking from the screen passes is better. And, I think it's reasonable to take away from this game that we didn't just beat an inferior opponent. Yes, we are the better team, and we always should have won this game. But this was a game that the experts thought, we win by 7, 8, 9 points, and we won it by 20, and it really could have been worse than that, and they were lucky to close the gap a little bit late in the game. So congratulations, Kirby, the staff, the Dawgs. Congratulations, Nate Frazier, Gunnar Stockton, the defensive team in general. Everybody really had a nice game. Very little to complain about in this game. So much so, I even heard Kirby's press conference post-game where he basically admitted he was going to have to make up something to chew the guys out about and keep them feeling like he was unhappy. So I think that's fun, exciting, and I hope that it does, and I feel like this does portend that the team is actually building and getting stronger, and they're going to need to be because we still have two really tough games left. We're going to have to play Texas, and we're going to have to play Georgia Tech. So we have two top 15 teams left on our schedule. We're going to have a little breather in between with Charlotte, but a lot of work still to do, but the general thinking from where we stand right now, as long as we at least win one of the two games between Georgia Tech and Texas, then we probably make the playoff. The SEC is going to be a little harder. A&M, Missouri might have been the best chance for A&M to take a loss, although they still have to play Texas. So in the Georgia perfect world, we want to beat Texas and then have Texas turn around and beat A&M. Our chance to make it to the SEC championship game probably depends on at least one of A&M or Alabama taking a loss so that we can finish 7-1 and they can finish 7-1, and so we get 3 teams at 7-1, and then we see where the tiebreakers go, and that may favor us. Obviously, if both A&M and Alabama win out, then they'll be in the SEC championship game, and that'll be that. So we'll cover those scenarios some more, but that's a good starter on that. Hey, I really appreciate it. I hope you had a great Saturday. I hope you enjoyed watching the Bulldogs win, and sort of that old feeling of watching our team just dominate and throttle an opponent and walk away kind of with, when's this game going to be over? It's been over for a while, but now I'm ready to move on and just celebrate, chat with people, have, eat and drink, have fun. And it's nice to do that it's nice when you win the noon game convincingly. It makes the rest of Saturday just kind of a fun way to sit around and see what everybody else does and go, hey, we were great. What are you guys doing? So anyway, thank you so much. We'll be back later in the week with more of those things we talked about on the podcast coming up. Hope you have a great Monday, and go Dogs.